Good morning, everyone. We are here today to have EdTech Society's Infocus interview with Dr. Saroja Ganapathy from Shrishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology. I'm here today as a representative from EdTech Society. EdTech Society is a professional non-profit association started in India by individuals who are committed to improving instruction and learning through the use of educational technologies. The members of EdTech Society are researchers, developers, practitioners in the field of educational technology. This includes higher education faculty, graduate students, instructional designers, educational technology tool developers, school teachers, government, corporate, and military organization trainers. Uh, I welcome to the stage Dr. Saroja Ganpathy. Let me introduce you to her in brief. Although it is a difficult task to have a brief introduction of this eminent personality. Dr. Saroja Ganapathy is an educator with over 2 decades of experience across a variety of higher education institutes. She is a graduate in language and literature who thinks through her parallel education in music and yet remains committed to engaging with the tangible and actionable. Dr. Saroja first forayed into design as a writer. She continues to engage with the field due to its eclectic nature, which allows her to learn, collaborate, and embrace diversity. She actively contributes to research projects, course designs, and teaching assignments across diverse areas such as communication, writing, postcolonial literature, Indian aesthetics, and performing arts, teacher education, as well as design education. She's a Ph.D. from Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Welcome, Dr. Saroja Ganapathy.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bruha, for that very generous introduction. Not sure I deserve it. But it's a pleasure to be here. I've been a member of EdTech Society since its inception, and I've watched so many of your talks that I think it's a privilege to be here today as a speaker.
This is a pleasure for us mainly. Let's talk a little bit about your topic for today. EdTech for All, Voices from Design Education at Shrishti Manipal. So I'm intrigued with the title first as an audience itself. Why EdTech for All? What is your reason and philosophy behind this EdTech for All?
Um, so yeah, first, this is what we're going to be speaking about in the next few minutes is primarily about a final year project for undergraduate students that I ran at Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology. The project is just concluded, and I called it EduTech for All. In fact, I made it a point to distinguish between EdTech as an industry and the larger field of education technology. But why this theme? Well, I have been dabbling with education technology for a while, more as a learning designer, a subject matter expert, but as someone who has been enthused by the reach of technology and its possibilities, and also as someone who's worked in teacher education and online education. I thought I could draw on this long term engagement to create a project space for my students in human centered design. So I would call it primarily a human centered perspective that I bring into the design project space. Um, the egalitarian, inclusive idea of education for all is now pretty much in our day and age, edutech for all. One, because technology is now an inseparable and growing part of education. And two, because we have realized that technology can actually make this ideal of education for all a reality. From the perspective of design, this poses an exciting goal before designers and design students. One that's full of challenges and yet one that promises a lot of meaningful work. So I saw this as a theme and a field that could continuously engage the student at a personal level and a professional level. What you see on the screen, in fact, are two pictures from our very early visit to a rural school on the outskirts of Bangalore called Anjana Vidya Kendra, with which we began our journey into the field and this project space. And right to the end of the project, this moment, this day was remembered very fondly by all the students. And I think it serves as evidence of the fact that this kind of direct immersion into the context, apprehension of the context, becomes a great way of motivating students and making them committed to producing meaningful work with whatever skills they have. So, the whole idea of EduTech for All reminds us to be committed to inclusivity while designing technological interventions. And it reminds us to be focused on people and context and to explore what technology can do as a medium or tool rather than running away with the charming possibilities of technology. So many of my students are already adept at using tech tools as interaction designers, actually deliberately and happily moved away from digital technology. Or they brought back digital technology only towards the end of their projects. That's how it proceeded.
It's interesting to have look at technology from not just a medium, but connect it with human, establish a human connection, uh, especially because that connects people who use technology and people who design technology, the human elements of them with technology. I agree with that. So that just brings me to my next question. Why the focus on EdTech in human-centered design?
Um, so, at two levels. Um, First, that in this project based learning space, we as faculty tend to bring our own experiences and expertise. And we also bring it to other courses at Srishti. It's a way of drawing on our own practice as well as our own personal convictions, which is why, given my association with education and edutech, I decided to bring it into this course. Also, I realized that there are obvious striking parallels and intersections, between a human-centered approach to design and the need for learner centricity and context centricity in creating any offering for education. So, the idea of human centricity becomes easily accessible when we consider the field of education. Then it helps students unpack the very meaning of technology from within learning context. Thus, they do not start with any particular kind of technology, but they begin by asking what medium, method, or tool can best address a specific need within a specific context while being empathetic to all those who are involved in or impacted by the context, be it learners or teachers or any other caregivers within the education field. And then this leads to a process that emphasizes continuous conversation and collaboration with these people. The project thus emphasized co designing with experts, with educators, and even with experiencing learners. To give just one example from project output, um, one of my students worked on the idea of maker spaces within low resource contexts. She spent the entire semester interacting with various learning contexts and maker spaces, meeting challenges and finding paths, pretty much like a river breaking into tributaries. So this was just her engaged contextual immersion that happened.
It's actually, when you're saying it, it seems like very interesting and very easy. It's actually, when from my journey in PhD, I've understood that connecting with people and collaborating at that level in which you are actually mixing up with them and getting that participatory approach from everyone.
Absolutely.
That itself is a big challenge. I
That
would
has
like
been,
to.
in fact, one of our central focus points in this entire course in human-centered design.
Yeah, so can you tell me more about your course in HCI?
It's not really HCI, but human-centered design. The human-computer interaction forms only
Oh,
one part of it. Um, So, students in the past 3 years have gone through a general contextual immersion and inquiry, which is the foundation course at Srishti, because we, along with facilitators, we take them to various locations, we give them a chance to think about various different kinds of contexts, and all learning therefore becomes primarily experiential. And from then on, the students of human centered design have branched on to cultivate specific skills as well as get mm, immersed in design research and the whole design process. So, as far as this project space goes in the final year, I looked at it as an opportunity, or rather, the project space itself in Srishti, not just confined to human centered design, but also spanning the other disciplines. The project space is an opportunity to bring together all that they have learned, the different kinds of learnings that they've had in the earlier years. Contextual immersion, there is research, there's a research focus, and very strongly, there is reflective practice. In the first, the odd semester, the final year, we have disciplinary perspectives coming in. So it's a disciplinary project. And in the final semester, they in fact interact with each other and the other disciplines as well. The projects themselves are interdisciplinary in nature. So it is 2 semesters of very intensive project based learning. We strive to ensure a balance between criticality and creativity in the whole design process through this course. Most importantly, in this ecosystem, we are very particular at making it very intensively process oriented rather than a very quick problem solution and outcome kind of structure. We focus on the entire process that the student follows, be it in research, be it in networking and collaboration, or in the whole process of creativity and research, because we are an institute of art and design, it's not just design. So this kind of process oriented approach leads to several unique outcomes in art and design.
It's Yeah. I just wanted to confirm before speaking ahead. Do you hear a lot of noise from my end? I'll shut down the windows and come back.
Not really, I don't know. It's just very
Oh,
faint. Oh.
so uh, I think you know uh, when you speak of all the different things such as disciplinary perspective, interdisciplinary perspectives, and bringing in criticality, creativity, one of the challenges is how do you, train students to capture all that. So I understand that as a faculty, having grown through all these questions and all these um, constructs, you have your views about them, but inculcating the same within the students, is it a challenge for you?
Of course, you really hit at the root of all the challenges that we face. And it's not an easy task, of course, but we we try to bring in multiplicity of perspectives, seeing things right from the beginning. So by the time students are in the final year, I think I would like to believe that they are used to dipping in and out and also balancing these different approaches. Um, so on a personal note, now um, I I have delved into, I've meandered through many kinds of institutions and academic programs, from literature major programs to being in engineering institutes, working with designers. I witnessed various ways of trying to forge connections between these different disciplines.
Hmm.
Um, we've seen several models. We've seen struggle with these models at the level of policy, the level of institution, teaching, convincing students of why all of them are important, and so on. And as an example, I've seen how the mandatory humanities component in the IITs allows students to stay in touch with sometimes a suppressed side of their personalities, something that they've not been in touch with for a while. Um, on the other hand, even though humanities students were deprived of a parallel balance with technology and science coming into their education, in recent times, I've been witnessing how digital humanities is bringing tech into the study of the humanities. So there are these very interesting ways of blending, collaborating, and fusing. The quest for an ideal balancing is really a perpetual one. What drew me to an ecosystem like Srishti's is how there is room created for all these perspectives and opportunities for fusion. It's usually through a process of exploration, ideation, making. Everything that we do, every aspect of very hands-on work, um, we try to draw from all these allied fields that really enrich each other. So, yes, of course, the faculty facilitating these courses becomes the primary anchor.
Mm.
But also, one person cannot really bring in all these aspects together. So we make it a point to bring in other faculty perspectives, even perspectives from those external to the institute, which is why students are actively encouraged to talk and get in touch with others.
Collaborate.
You
Mm.
will see some of this in the project examples that we'll see, that they have constantly been collaborating, talking to, getting feedback from experts, people who have had a lot of experience in certain fields. So eventually, every student chooses their own path, especially in the space given to them within the project. And every student also chooses their own balance between these, different disciplines and different
Right.
perspectives.
It's
So, yeah,
it's a wonder though that, like, wonder as in, see, myself coming from learning about learner centric design, or learning from learner centric design of courses. I think that if we lend the power, it's not us lending the power to somebody, as our students, but and acknowledging their power itself in their experiences and their perspectives. That's wonderful to hear about this.
and also I would say putting them back in touch with that power that they have, especially when I took up a theme like this. I realized there's a growing realization that students want to go back and get in touch with all their years of experience, because education as a field is accessible to all of them. They have been in education for so many years, and it brought back so many memories, so many different experiences, and the criticality also stemmed from looking back on these experiences and realizing that it's a field where, as designers, they have a lot to do and give. So in that sense, it was wonderful to see the intrinsic motivation generated
Right.
by the theme, the experiences, by going out to the field. Because as educators and researchers in education, we know that this is one of the biggest challenges these days, ensuring that there is strong intrinsic motivation in students.
Have you have you felt difficulties with this, going out and connecting with people and getting to know or learning from others? I imagine that to be easy thing for somebody who's an extrovert already and ready
Exactly.
to do. Is that difficult for somebody who is meditative and a little introverted, or looking inwards more than looking outward? How does that?
Absolutely, that's a wonderful thought to put out there, because even in my student community, I see all these different kinds of students. But so the challenge additionally becomes creating the right modes of communication for all of these personality types. And I have myself grown up as an introvert. I still consider myself one. So I can quite relate to your question. But I think when one is motivated by what one does, those channels open up. So it's not a mandatory process, but rather it's a process of drawing oneself out and discovering all the different aspects of one's own potential. Um, and since it's a semester long project, and it is so much of a reflective process. I think it brings that out as well in students. And it's wonderful how each student creates their own channel, for progress, and takes on becomes more and more self-directed as the process goes on, and they discover their own means of connecting. Now, again, technology is handy here. Some students are more comfortable with emails and WhatsApp, others more comfortable with going out there and talking, and they get to explore all these channels. They just
Right.
require this constant nudging from the mentor.
It's being a part of EdTech Society for over 2 years now. I feel that it gave me this avenues to, even so myself, I'm an extrovert, so I didn't have the perspective of this for this question earlier. But having so many different variety of people visiting us for master classes and for Infocus interview, it kind of gives you a little bit of reflective edge to understand what to look outward and then look back inward and figure out things about perspective itself. Out, in what ways can a tech society be handy for such a course, or how can we as a tech society support instructors like you more? Can you speak a little about that?
Um, First, I would say, for as far as my course was concerned, the project was concerned, it was a real treasure for us, going back to what is available on the YouTube channel, especially. And I introduced them to this channel very early on in the course. I'd like to mention one video that we watched, in fact, throughout a long session in class. It was Dr. Gayatri Vaidya's exposition of mind spark. It really hit them, of how there are all these complexities in any context, and how scaling is such a huge challenge in education, and how technology can really respond to these challenges. Students are very intrigued by the whole adaptive learning process, and one result of it you will see in one of the projects that we will showcase in a few minutes. Ishwar, my student, and in conversation, we suddenly came up with this question. We talk about personalized adaptive learning for learners, but can't we have that for teachers? And that led to his project. So this is a one direct example from the EdTech Society repository that I mentioned. But definitely, it's an immensely useful and growing repository of very, very precious materials. I would definitely say two things, in fact, two specific things. Maybe going on as the resource pool grows, we could have some way of tagging, classifying the materials so that people find them easily depending on what they are looking for. Because in my case, I had been pretty regular in um, looking up the videos and listening to the talks, but I'm sure that many who are not regularly part of the EdTech Society ventures would also find a lot that is useful there. Maybe some kind of easy classification. It's not an easy task. Will help. Tagging will help in that sense. And second, to go back to this particular MindSpark example, from the point of view of human-centered design, I realized how valuable case studies are, because you're talking about the technology and the potential of technology. You're talking about skills, technical aspects, but you're also putting them in context and relating them to real human stories. So when
Hmm.
these human stories come up, they are especially very impactful, I feel, for students in particular.
I, in the last no, this month we had a T4E conference happening at IIT Gandhinagar, and
Yeah,
there
I
were,
missed that one.
yeah, there were about 300 people coming together and attending, and there were 8 to 9 workshops that were happening every evening. It's an intense time, 4:30 to 6:30, and so many workshops were there, but people were so much interested to attend the workshop and learn something. As you said, it's very contextualized and something that you can experience learning. I believe that it's good for those who can attend the conference, but EdTech Society organizing this on the online platform, that is going to be a lot more.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are so many questions that come up, outlier contexts and questions. People want to ask how something that we assume to be the norm can work in places and contexts where even simple assumptions may not be valid. To give you an example, there was this time when I was conducting an e-content making session, and one of the participants, teachers, said, I am in a remote rural area where students don't have access to any internet or technology. How do you think this mandatory e-content making rule is going to even be useful to us? We need questions like this, which prompts us to think beyond our assumptions. And this is one of the great things about this group also, that I know that although we call it the EdTech Society, the focus is so much on questions coming from education and not on um the latest technology and how it can transform things by waving a magic wand. That is not
Point.
at all the approach. So this rootedness is very valuable thing in the philosophy that puts together these resources as well.
It's I want to continue this conversation, but I'm also interested in knowing about what are the different projects. So you said about there's a value in case studies. I'm really interested in knowing
Right.
about some of the interesting projects that you've done, and how was the experience? And
Yeah. We just, in fact, last week finished with our showcase, our exhibition of projects at the end of the semester,
uh,
and it was just wonderful for me to witness the pathways that the students had created. Um, so broadly, I think we did a lot of conversation. A lot of our initial conversations happened to be around school context. So we connected with a few NGOs. I would like to take this opportunity to thank NGOs like Meghshala and Akshara in Bangalore. Akshara was with us throughout, I would say, and we got the chance to um, see how they do very committed work with government schools. We Some of us even attended a government school math contest and graded papers. It was some experience for us. Uh, from that, students really picked up their own individual areas of exploration. We had a bunch of projects for early learners and parents of early learners who are caught in this decision making dilemma. We had another bunch of projects for middle school, including a project on science through everyday objects. This other project I mentioned about maker spaces. We have some game design for middle school, uh, one of which we will see today. We also had high school questions such as what happens when learners, gradually lose their kinesthetic ability in learning as they grow older. And this was a student who's herself a dancer, and she came up with this XR experience to teach calculus. So we had another student talking about different ways of dealing with academic stress. Then we had another bunch of students who looked at adult learners, even functional things like investment journey. How do you facilitate it experientially through
hmm.
a technology-based solution? There's another one we'll see today about Kannada learning for so language learning when you migrate to another city for young adults. Um, we had a couple of, for me, very satisfying projects given my background on music education. One student built a product, a handheld synthesizer, which would help a learner just tinker with it and understand notes rather than going through a very theoretical instruction. Yet another one continuing to work and explore and research the area. Worked on the possibility of AI tutors for Indian classical music. I'm sure some of these are going to be out there as products and academic papers within the next 1 year. And of these, and there was another important bunch of projects for teachers, with teachers at the center. It spanned technology and AI virtual assistants, right up to a project on J. Krishnamurti's philosophy and how that can be made accessible to teachers today. So this is a range of projects, and I'd love for my students to come in now and speak about some of theirs. I have tried to choose projects that represent different approaches and mediums and have different users as their target.
So I'm just going to tell our audience here that when we asked Saroja to talk about the projects, she herself volunteered all the students so that they get to speak about their projects. It is wonderful opportunity for us to hear from the students who created the projects.
I would like to say that they speak on behalf of their entire cohort. It's a cohort of 24, would have been impossible to get everyone, but they only represent the work of a much larger cohort.
Oh, welcome Isha, Ishwar, Mansi, and Siddhant. You can turn on your video. You can all unmute if there is no background noise, and you can begin your. I'll just.
Right. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So, my name is Ishwar, and this is my project. So, I worked on a project called Teach Up. The project was to kind of, create a personalized and adaptive upskilling platform for teachers. Like Saroja already mentioned, the reason I even wanted to look into this was because we are speaking so much about how students need access to personalized adaptive learning and something that they can take on their own pace and something that is tailored to their needs, right? But there's not a lot of people talking about this for teachers in general. And the problem that I essentially wanted to deal with was the fact that teachers usually attend something called upskilling programs or training programs, and these training programs, more often than not, end up being very generic and one size fits all kind of approach that is taken in these training programs. And my aim was to kind of work with teachers to understand what is it that they are looking for in these training programs. How would they want to go about, designing a training program if at all they had the option to do it for themselves. So there was some of this co-creation that happened where we had a lot of interviews with teachers to understand from them what are their problems with training programs and what was their vision for a training program that if they had the opportunity to create their own training program, right? So how would they go about doing that and stuff like that. So all of that led to this platform being created. I'm also going to try and talk about why a teacher upskilling is even important. Why did I even want to choose that as a topic? Because I think in the beginning, Saroja mentioned about how there is a growing role of technology in the space of education, and we are trying to make it inclusive for everyone, right? So that's not just students who are there in a remote area or something like that. It's also for teachers, especially for teachers who are right now coming into this era of AI and technology being used in education so rapidly. How do we even make it possible for them to learn about these things, right? Learn about these things and implement them in their classrooms. So that was one of the key reasons that I started looking into upskilling for teachers. Because what about teachers who want to learn about new things? It's not like teachers once they finish B.Ed, they're all ready to come out and teach their students every single day because things keep changing around them. And how do we help teachers adapt to these changes that happen around them? Right, so that was one of the important reasons that I went ahead with this. And I'll just cover my process quickly. So obviously started out by interacting with teachers themselves. These were interviews, surveys to understand what their outlook is towards these kind of programs and what are their problems and stuff like that. But also interestingly, I had the opportunity to interact with uh, trainers who go to schools and provide, deliver training programs and kind of take their point of view about what they think about this space and what are their point of views or the aspects that are dysfunctional in this area. And then also, obviously, getting the opportunity to interact with uh, technology experts to see how we can implement the idea of personalized adaptive learning for teachers. So even Dr. Lakshmi, for example, was one of them whom I had the opportunity to interact with and learn from. And towards the end of the project, there was a lot of co-creation that happened. So obviously all of the problems came together, a problem statement came together, and then I thought, why not this time, instead of me being like someone who's like a designer who just creates something and goes and hands it to them and asks them, yeah, let me know what you think about it. How about creating with them and asking them to kind of envision something that they would like to use, right? So I conducted a bunch of workshops to understand from them what they think would be the best way to approach this training program. So we literally created a framework to help teachers conduct a self-assessment to understand what are the areas in which they want to upskill, and those things then fed into my me creating the digital platform which will eventually help them upskill in those areas that they deem are important for them to upskill, right? So yeah, I think that was one of the most satisfying parts of the process, because when I got to see that teachers themselves are able to come up with these kind of frameworks, and all that we need to do is just make sure that we are able to connect those dots and give it to them as a finished product, because obviously they don't have the time to do that, right? So I think that's how the whole project came together towards the end, and got to take the final finished product, give it to them for testing, and the feedback was really wonderful. And I was really happy to see how there's a lot of teachers who are really motivated to learn every single day about what is happening and what are the new things that they can take and implement in their classroom. So I think, yeah, all in all, that's my project. If there's any questions, I'll take a few minutes to answer them. But otherwise, yeah, I've also given a link and a QR code to the whole project documentation. So if anyone is interested, they can always scan that or click that and go into the documentation.
So I have one question.
Yeah,
Is this so? One question is, what are the teachers teaching? Is that specific to the teacher cater to a specific context, or it is context wide? I mean, to what how generalizable it is? How can it be used?
got it. So the idea is that the platform was catered to teachers in primary, middle, and high school, mostly, like in state and CBC schools and stuff like that. And the content inside the platform. So let's say there are courses, there are workshops that teachers can attend, and they can go through these things. But using certain AI technologies and PAL technologies, what happens is, let's say you're a Hindi teacher and I'm a math teacher, and we both are interested in learning about assessments for teachers, like about new assessment
Hmm.
techniques for teachers. And what can happen is the platform can create a learning pathway for both of us, which these pathways will be individually tailored to both of our needs. So, as a Hindi teacher, we'll take you through the pathway where you will get introduced to strategies and techniques that you can use and leverage the most as a language teacher. And maybe as a math teacher, for me, I will be getting exposed to those kind of areas where I can use these strategies or techniques that will work best for a math class to test how students are learning or assess how students are learning math.
Right.
So that was the goal behind making it personalized and adaptive. I hope that answers the question that you had. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that was
yeah,
important.
I can
Yeah,
understand. So, basically, you trust in the content knowledge of the person, and
yeah,
from that you can
yeah,
modifying, or you can personalize their pathways.
correct,
Lovely to
correct.
know about this platform, Ishwar.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present. It was great. Thank you. Yeah.
Let's go to Manvi.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Manvi.
Okay. Here's my project, Nama Kannada. So let's start with understanding India is one of the most diverse multilingual countries. And my project is just an attempt to preserve this diversity, focusing on one such low resource language, Kannada. So a lot of people migrate to Bengaluru from all across India for better job and career opportunities, but they all face some common challenges like talking to auto annas or giving directions to delivery executives or just bargaining with a street vendor. And these language barriers hurdle their everyday communication or performance of daily life task activities, leading to a bigger problem, which is a functional barrier. So
Hmm.
therefore, language barrier is an issue much bigger than we can imagine, which is spread across different states and regions of India, and it needs immediate solution. And that's how my project was born. Currently, there are less accessible and effective tools and resources supporting the language learning needs of young adults. So, starting with Kannada, the aim of our project is to work towards fostering friendly relations among locals and non locals. Another problem is that even if a person has grown up in Bangalore their entire life and even studied the language in school, they still can't have a proper conversation in Kannada. Why? Because language is taught like just another subject in India, and
Hmm.
schools focus on passive, not active, rote learning, grammar drills. There is very less focus on interactive and conversational way of learning. Another issue, there is no guiding, no equivalent to the CFR framework for Indic languages, which makes it a big challenge as there is no guiding standard for the development of uniform tools and resources for language learning. So after learning about this problem in greater detail, as a designer, my process was to understand how can young adults learn a new language quickly, easily, and effectively. So I did my share of field visits. I went to language learning institutes. I interviewed a lot of foreign and Indic language learners with different learning levels, like novice, intermediate, advanced. And I collaborated with language, Kannada language experts, South Indian teachers, and South Indian language teachers, and also foreign language teachers, and also technological experts to understand what kind of different technological solutions I can bring about for this kind of a problem. During the entirety of this project, I myself faced the challenge of learning a new Indic language throughout because I was learning Kannada. Note that I do not know that. after after all collecting all of these insights, they acted as a guiding force to help me understand key objectives to keep in mind while I am creating a solution for this kind of a problem. My focus was to integrate the best pedagogical practices with an effective technological solution. So my focus was on building a very easy, accessible, and intuitive tool, preferably on a platform that is familiar to the Indian user base. So there is not a new learning curve that they have to go through because language learning itself comes with a new learning curve, and I don't want to overburden my learner. And another point was to cater to diverse learning styles, levels, and preferences, focusing on teaching conversational Kannada for everyday use cases in very contextually relevant scenarios. So the learner is not just learning about a new language, but also the cultural aspects of that place. Uh,
Hmm.
so helping them go local gradually, focusing on also helping the users start by communicating and not grammarating because correct way of speaking can come eventually once they begin.
Hmm.
So these were the key objectives for tool building. Next, my solution, which is Nama Kannada, an AI-powered Kannada tutor that teaches the language in very simulated real-life learning scenarios. The user can learn via their mother tongue, and it can be accessed just by a phone call, so an audio bot, and then move on. They can also use a chat interface through a WhatsApp bot. So basically, initially, the user is just immersing themselves by a lot of speaking and listening practice. And then
Hmm.
they are using the multimodal aspects of visual learning, like images, photos, videos, a lot of pronunciation practice to standify the learning. Uh, the entire tool offers the user a lot of control, flexibility, and a language learning playground in certain way. Like if you as a user want to focus on just learning grammar, you can do that. If I want to focus on learning a lot of words, I can do that. So the conversation can be made flexible and adaptive according to the user's needs.
Hmm.
And a lot of other features are also employed, like the tool can track the user progress. It can help them revise what they have learned before. It can also schedule calls for the next learning sessions, etc. Also worth noting, it's a very affordable and cheaper way of learning than actually having a tutor hired. Yeah.
So,
So yeah.
interestingly, what I used an app to learn when I was traveling abroad, but
Okay.
there was no way to get feedback for what I am saying, and
Correct.
especially difficult in the Indian context because there's a lot of different dialects and there's a lot of stress on
Yeah.
words, way you say the words. So
Yes.
I learned Kannada Ishta Ide just in Marathi, I would say, because I speak
I
Marathi, so
guess.
I learned
Yeah.
how to pronounce it, how to enunciate it in Marathi.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do you
So
tackle
I would
such?
mention, yeah. So a lot of iterative testing and prototyping went through. Eventually, I was attempting to teach from English, Kannada through English. But then I understood that the best way to teach an Indian language is through an Indian language. And then there are certain words and skill set which transfer across languages. So I also had a Kannada language learning workshop where there were people with different mother tongues and different language learning levels, and they were all learning together, and they all could figure out common words in their individual mother tongues, and make their own connections and while they were learning a new language. So yeah, and also yeah, dialects and everything that is there. So I think it comes down to deciding if I want to help the users learn formal Kannada or informal Kannada for the start. And also I'm focusing on many conversation and spoken aspects of words, so that changes. Written Kannada changes,
Mm,
so
right.
I'm focusing on colloquial version of it. Yeah, so that's true. There's a lot of diversity in a single language. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely to know about that. I mean, I didn't think of language learning in that way. It would come bring up so much of diversity. I didn't think it was so local as well, you know. Yeah. I mean, we think about local dialects, people who understand that, learning English or learning Hindi and learning
Yes.
your statewide standardized language so that they get access. But people who don't know the local languages are, we don't have access to that much of rich knowledge also.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Manvi.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Siddhant.
Hi, I'm Siddhant, and this is a game called Architect of Empires. So the problem that I discovered was that learning was not really relevant, and students did not see the point of studying certain subjects. They found them boring, and they found them to be very rote learning oriented and only school purpose. They did not see how we could apply that knowledge in real life. And when I went to speak to students about this, they mentioned, and many teachers about this, they mentioned how history and civics face the major issue of rote learning and not seeing how it will be applicable in, because the history textbooks, they showed it to me and it was just like this king did this in this period and he ruled over this region. Now, next era, like there was no application of what do I do with this information, and this is where I wanted to understand how do we make it more relevant. Another issue was that
Sorry to
with math.
interrupt, but I think there's some background noise from Sneha's end, is it? I can hear a lot of dogs barking.
I don't have background noise here.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I think somebody has a cute puppy or somebody.
Yeah, and I
Go
faced
ahead,
a
Siddhant.
similar. Yeah, so I saw a similar issue occurring with maths where students did not see how do we apply this information we actually practice in maths in real life. After fifth standard, maths just becomes about like algebra and all, and where do we even apply it? How do we even use it in real life? And to understand how to make learning more relevant, I came across an idea called interdisciplinary curriculum, multidisciplinary curriculum. And
Mm,
multidisciplinary curriculum usually has a project based learning space, right? And I wondered what if in this project based learning space we could have a game instead, because project based learning requires time, effort, infrastructure, money. But what if students could see the relevance of what they are actually studying through a game?
mm,
And this is where my idea was born. And when I looked through the history textbooks, I looked through those math textbooks, I understood that these textbooks are made for just rote learning. So if there had to be a learning outcome, what would it be? And diving deeper, I understood that we could make them understand how kingdoms are administered, the administration of different kingdoms in the medieval Indian era, how each decision led to a certain outcome, and why this should not happen in future, the consequences of those actions. And this is where I finally ideated a lot, and came up with an idea where you are running your own empire in a game. You will make your own decisions in a game. You will see the consequences of the decisions in a game. The game is quite simple. You have to build temples to keep people happy. And the more temples you have, the more events you can build in those temples. Because in medieval Indian periods, temples were a place of activities and events as such. So the more temples and infrastructure you build, the more happier people get, and hence the more tax you can collect. With this tax, you can also choose to build more temples or build more infrastructure like canals, agriculture, or you can choose to attack other kingdoms and loot their wealth. So I'm bringing about the whole aspect of how what happens in a kingdom when there's peace. In textbooks, we just study about war, but what happens at peace? We no, none of us study that, and I'm bringing about that aspect through this
mm,
game. And basically my process was, I've discussed my process already, but when I went and tested this with students multiple times, students were also quite, they had a very positive feedback. Of course, the feedback wasn't positive in the first two or three times of rounds of testing, but by the fourth or fifth round, the feedback became positive, and the students thoroughly enjoyed the game. And also, a reflective session is important after this game. So during this reflective session, they understood, okay, this is how kingdoms are administered. We first thought kings and kingdoms were just sitting on a throne and, like, wearing gold chains, wearing a gold hat, or wearing a gold crown. But now we understand, no, you have to balance your army, you have to balance your, you have to manage your people's happiness, you have to also
Hmm.
collect tax from the kingdom. So the whole economics here is coming into picture, and now they understand a lot more about history, and they also understand how maths is actually used in history. Because in my event cards, I have certain math problems which you actually have to solve to understand if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, example, if you have great agricultural produce, and
Hmm.
if you have agricultural fields, or you have canals built, you have good agricultural produce. Now there's a math problem to understand how much reward you get for it or how much you lose for it. So there's
Right.
constant application and revision of maths happening along with history, which is where students saw, oh, math is not just used in, say, physics, but also used in history, because now you're balancing your army, I'm balancing my wealth, I'm collecting tax, and I'm also solving these maths problems. So I think by the end of my last testing, the feedback was quite positive. And yeah, this is my game.
Lovely. I understand. We had a short course on human centered design, but that we focused on creating learning solutions only. In that, taking feedback itself was difficult. From I can see in the picture, the learners are so young, right? How
Right.
do they give feedback? Everything you give, they might say it's good, or they might say no, I don't like it. Then how do you elicit that feedback which will help you improve? That's also
Definitely.
interesting. Yeah. Can you tell
So
me more about?
So honestly, all the feedback was quite positive from the students. My primarily focus of feedback was the school principal and the school teachers of history.
Uh,
They were the ones who were giving me the actual feedback into, what, this might not work, but this might work, and we could change it in this direction. And that helped me change my project.
And another question is, like, the teacher will have a better insight into, if one of the students collects a lot of money and then uses it for war, how to, integrate the sense of, sensibilities of these history within the learners. That's also a key task. Maybe teacher would be more, it's great that you're collecting feedback from the teachers for such reasons, which
Definitely.
learner won't learn, at that age may not be critically reflective on what I am building.
Right.
Lovely,
Right.
lovely.
During the game itself, the teacher was present, and when people were collecting a lot more tax, and an event card was drawn that if you have collected too much tax, if you have collected more than 10 coins of tax because of whatever you've done, then you have face a penalty. And the teacher was there guiding them. See, taxes are important, but you can't keep collecting them all the time. And her inputs during the game also helped a lot in the reflective session, definitely.
Nice, nice. We had a game created Katharan. We went to Toykathon with that game. In that, we were teaching Sanskrit word building, language, sentence building, and we put up challenges which are contextual to Sanskrit, because Sanskrit, in Sanskrit you can move around the words, right?
Hmm.
The structure of the sentence is not specifically given. So it's a board game in which you get challenges in, such as, start a sentence with adjective, form a sentence which starts with adjective. It is interesting to have such game building, and games are engaging, especially for this level of audience, the grades of audience. Nice,
Definitely.
interesting, very interesting.
Definitely. And this game did not focus a lot more on the strategy aspect into thinking what to do, what not to do. Every student was taking their own time and thinking, should I do this or should I do that? Should I do this instead? Because there are multiple options you can do at a particular turn. And they had to choose their option carefully to make the correct decision. So I think that also brought about some thinking and reflecting during the game.
Ah, thank you so much, Siddhant.
Thank you for your option to present my project.
We welcome Isha.
Hi. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Yeah. Hi, so my name is Isha. My project is called Sparsh, which means touch. So basically, my project revolves around the idea of how play based learning works for visually impaired students. So, how I came about this topic was I actually started with the idea of creating something visual. So, I wanted to start my project with the idea of, expanding on the idea of how we learn through visuals every day and wanting to create something like a more immersive visual experience for students. But as and when I was going through the process, I understood that, if everything is visual, then what am I doing new? So I
Mm-hmm.
started looking at it from a different perspective, and that's where I understood if what if the aspect of vision is taken away from visual learning, then what will happen? So that's when I actually started looking at this topic of how does learning take place for visually impaired students. So through that process, the problems that I was targeting was how education methods rely heavily on visual stimuli, and that actually creates a barrier for visually impaired students. And looking at our education system in depth, I've understood that how we lack on inclusive learning. Even though we say a lot of things are meant for everyone, there are some aspects that are left behind. So that was one thing that I wanted to target. And throughout my research, I did some secondary research as well on what exists for the visually impaired students. So that was also a little bit of understanding point for me that nothing actually is existing for them. There are some things which are made for them, but an aspect of play or for game, there is nothing which is made for them, but everything is adaptive to what we interact with. So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to design something keeping them first in mind, and also look at how inclusive the learning experience can be. So some of the key aspects I targeted was inclusive learning, how touch and sensory efficient my activities can be for the students, and how I can facilitate group play and make the activities more interesting for them and not repeat anything. Because in play and in game based learning, repetition is a main factor where students mostly give back on learning once the activity is repeated quite often. So these were some key points that I wanted to facilitate in my activity that I was designing. So throughout the process, as my end product, I came up with a toolkit which is called Sparsh basically. And it comprises of three activities which focus on pattern based and texture based learning. So I'll just quickly explain the activities and what each activity has its learning outcome to be. So if you can see on the screen, the first activity is called the touch grid, where essentially there are shapes which are being formed. So it's like a math equation where one shape minus one shape is equal to what? So if you can see on the grid, there are shapes and equations being formed vertically and horizontally. So essentially, all the shapes, all the tiles are embossed with the necessary shape which is being formed, and
Mm-hmm.
the students have to choose those tiles, and place it in the correct format to complete the whole grid. The second activity is called Feel the Match, which essentially is like match the following that we do, but this is with textures. So essentially, this is like a 3D cube which has velcros attached on each side, and there are different textures which I have made, and there are these tiles which are to be placed on each side with the correct texture to be aligned. So one side has a rough texture. So you have to choose the correct tile and complete the whole side with all the rough textures that are there. So that was one activity. And the third activity is focuses on the idea of association, basically, where I don't know how much it is coming through that one image, but what I wanted to create was I've made use of bindis, different textures of bindis. So
Mm-hmm.
essentially, I've associated one bindi with one texture. Let's say it's a rough texture, second bindi with a smooth texture, and third bindi with a dotted texture. So wherever I've placed the bindis at a particular square in the grid, the students have to take that particular tile and place it on that bindi. So they're learning association, they're increasing their memory skills, they're understanding how to differentiate between different textures and also understand the concept of making shapes. So
Hmm.
I also went with all my products to a blind school, and I, played the games with them. I interacted with the blind students, and I really got a good positive feedback as they were able to understand what I'm trying to say. So I think in a way, I was able to portray what I wanted to create for the visually impaired students.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, you at the beginning you said, I asked myself, what am I, all these adaptive learning things are there, what am I doing, what is new? So
Yeah.
it's a two-way thing. You add novelty to your work as well as make contribution to the society. That is amazing, amazing.
Thank you.
Wonderful, Lisha.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present today.
We have also some comments about the audience is also amazed at your work that you are doing, and the different context, also the different perspectives from which you are looking at your work. It's very extremely commendable. I think all of you. So I'm a student today. I can't call you student. I thank all of you project creators for developing such interesting ideas, and I also thank Dr. Saroja for and her team for helping the students recognize their true potential through such variety of topics.
Thank you so
I,
much, Ms. Ruha. It was really a pleasure and a great opportunity for us to come and converse with you today. Thank you, EdTech Society, for having us with you today.
in so to where do they reach out to you? Is there a way, website of your college or your institute, Shrishti Institute? Can you tell about that?
Yeah, sure. Srishti has a website, of course, Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design, and Technology. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect with more people working in the field. Um, I'm sure we have many opportunities for collaboration in future with some of our audience. And if people watching this later also have questions, please feel free to reach me. I will probably maybe you can share my email ID with them. Also, my LinkedIn. I'm
Yes,
on
sure.
LinkedIn as well. Yeah,
Ah,
request
we'll
if you want
share
to have it.
this on our comments, YouTube comments. Then, are you fine with that?
Sure.
Sure.
I'll also be
So,
happy to share the LinkedIn page.
we are also hopeful to see you more with EdTech Society master classes, or we will have T4E again this year. So we look forward to meeting you. Earlier before the interview, we were discussing, and Saroja was saying that we look forward to having them as tools presenters, all these students as tool presenters in the next T4E. So if you want to catch them, ask more questions about their products and their journey, please be there in the next time we have these people visit us. So at Tech Society, you can follow us on social media. You can reach out to us through our website at techsociety.org. For any assistance and help, please write to us at info@techsociety.org. Thank you all for joining us today and making this conversation such an enriching, and also beginning the day with such a thought provoking conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.